Thank you. Well, Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, in partnership with Rhodes College student-led organization Just City Advocates, will host Justice Without Execution. It's a panel event addressing executions resuming in Tennessee. And joining us today is Stacey Rector, Executive Director of Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's talk about it. Let's first address the message your organization has to the families of victims of the crimes that put people on death row. What do you say to them?
Well, it's horrific. Obviously, all violence is horrific. Murder, the pain that inflicts, and the lifelong impact that has. It's part of the reason why we have broadened our mission, not only to be working to end the death penalty, but also to prevent violence and support those who've experienced harm through violent crime, because we think it's so critically important that those folks get the support that they need. What we have learned is that the vast majority of people who are victims of violent crime and their families, the death penalty is not something that even impacts them, right? And there's so many needs these families have in the wake of that tragedy, financial, emotional, mental health. We want to make sure they're getting what they need on that end of the process.
Okay. And the state of Tennessee recently resumed the death penalty after 3 years, a 3-year pause when the state admitted it had not been following lethal injection protocols. Now, the protocols have now changed from 3 to 1 drug. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, our protocol continues to be veiled in secrecy, which was what got folks into problems before. The Department of Correction has been keeping things confidential, quote unquote. What we know is that lots of things were not being done that were supposed to be done, rules weren't being followed. We've now switched to a new drug that is known to cause problems, including pulmonary edema in people who are executed, without any real sense that any of the problems that stopped executions have been addressed. There's been no court review of the protocol, so again, we're concerned.
What kind of alternatives would you like to see to take the place of the death penalty?
In Tennessee, we already have alternative sentencing. We have life and life without parole, which are both available. For us, what we really believe is the real alternative to the death penalty is investment in prevention and in support for people who've been harmed, in education, in health care, in ensuring that people have what they need, particularly, like I said, people who've experienced trauma, who need the help to recover from that. We think if we were doing more investment there instead of on the death penalty, which costs taxpayers millions more than the alternative sentences, we would see a difference.
Right. Now, Byron Black was executed in August for, it was 1988 murders of his girlfriend and her 2 young daughters, despite a legal issue over his defibrillator. Can you explain what his attorney's concerns were about that?
Well, the state had given him a defibrillator because of heart problems, but then there needed to be a doctor to be able to turn that off, and the state did not want to do that. The concern was that he would continue to be shocked. There was also concern because of the drug that's being used, pentobarbital, causing this pulmonary edema in the lungs, a sense of drowning, without actually anesthetizing the person. Unfortunately, what we know is that Mr. Black did raise his head multiple times and said it hurt so bad. So the fears, at least around the pain that would be caused, unfortunately came to pass.
And there are people who would say he's been convicted of a horrible crime. What do you say to that?
Well, yes, he was convicted of a horrible crime. He also had an intellectual disability, which should have excluded him from the death penalty. That's clearly a constitutional issue. It's Tennessee law, and yet it happened. That's a whole nother story. But yes, the crime was heinous. What I want people to remember, though, is that everyone involved, including all the correctional staff, the warden, they're all participating in this too. These are state employees who are being asked to do this on our behalf, and whatever happens in that room they have to live with. And so we need to think about how this is impacting them beyond the person being executed.
All right, quickly, Sabrina Butler Smith, the first woman in the U.S. to be exonerated from death row, is one of the panelists today at 5:30 at Rhodes College. She was wrongfully convicted as a teen for the death of her son, who actually died of a hereditary kidney condition. Why do you think it's important for you to share her story, your organization, to make sure she's on the platform?
Yeah, I just think it's critically important for people to understand that as long as this is a human institution, mistakes are going to be made. We have alternative sentencing that is less expensive than pursuing the death penalty for a handful of folks for 30+ years. And we would not be risking, by using those other sentences, the execution of innocent people. We're up to over 200 people since 1973 who've been wrongfully convicted, sentenced to death, later to be exonerated. That is just not worth the risk.
All right. Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming in. Again, this is Stacey Rector, Executive Director for Tennessee for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Again, thank you for joining us, and good luck with your event.
Thank you so much.
All right, back in just